Smoke filled the air, thick and choking, rising from burning houses. The alien city was under attack. Screams echoed through the narrow streets as people ran for their lives. Sparks of fire lit the night sky, and the sound of metal clashing rang like thunder. Raiders, armed and merciless, stormed through the gates. They broke down doors, dragged prisoners, and cut down anyone who resisted. In the middle of this chaos was a young alien woman. Her skin glowed faintly under the moonlight, her hair tangled as she ran, her heart beating wildly. She had tried to escape with her guards, but one by one they fell. Now she was alone. Her feet stumbled over the broken stones, and she pressed herself against a wall, trying not to breathe too loudly. But the raiders were skilled hunters. Their laughter grew closer. She could hear their boots crunching over debris, could hear them shouting to each other about the reward for catching her alive. Her people's traditions made her valuable, a leader's daughter, a prize no raider would let slip away. She closed her eyes for a moment, whispering a quiet prayer, hoping someone, anyone, would come. One of the raiders spotted her. His sharp teeth gleamed as he grinned. "There she is!" he shouted, raising his blade. Panic shot through her veins. She tried to run, but another raider blocked her path. Trapped. She turned left, right, but there was no escape. Their shadows loomed over her. She pressed her back to the wall, clutching a small dagger with shaking hands. She knew it was useless, but she would not surrender easily. Still, her hands trembled too much to hold the blade steady. The raiders moved in slowly, enjoying her fear. One reached out to grab her arm when suddenly a new sound cut through the chaos. Heavy boots, fast and steady, and a voice shouting in a language unfamiliar to the raiders but strong, commanding. A figure burst into the alley. He was human. Armor dented, face smeared with dirt and blood, but his eyes burned with fire. He carried no shining sword, only a battered rifle and a knife at his belt. Yet when he moved, there was no hesitation. The raiders laughed when they saw him. "A human?" one sneered. "What can he do?" But their laughter ended quickly. The human lifted his rifle and fired, the crack of the shot echoing loud through the alley. The first raider fell before he understood what had happened. The others snarled and rushed at him. The human didn't back away. He charged. The alien woman could only watch in shock as the fight unfolded. He moved like a storm, quick and brutal. He struck with his rifle, then his fists, then his knife, never pausing, never giving the raiders a chance to surround him. Blood sprayed across the stones, screams rose and fell, and in moments the attackers lay broken on the ground. The last raider, the one who had nearly grabbed her, turned to flee. But the human caught him by the collar, slammed him against the wall, and pressed the knife to his throat. His voice was low, dangerous. "You won't touch her." Then, with one final push, the raider dropped, lifeless. Silence fell. The alien woman stood frozen. Her dagger slipped from her trembling hand and clattered to the ground. She could not believe what she had just seen. A single human had defeated the raiders who had terrified her people. He turned toward her now. His chest rose and fell heavily, his arm bleeding from a cut, but his eyes softened as they met hers. He reached out a hand. She stepped back instinctively, fear still gripping her heart. He did not move closer. His voice, rough but calm, broke the silence. "You're safe now?" Her lips parted, but no words came. No human had ever risked themselves for her kind. Humans were supposed to be weak, desperate, always beneath her people. Yet this one had stood against death itself to protect her. The ground felt unsteady beneath her feet. From the distance, more screams echoed, the battle still raging across the city. He looked back toward the firelit sky, then back at her. For a moment, his face hardened with determination. "We have to move," he said, nodding down the alley. "They'll come again." Her voice finally returned, though faint. "Why? Why did you save me?" The human gave a tired smile, though his eyes held no mockery. "Because you needed help." Something inside her cracked at those words. Simple, direct, without expectation of reward. In her culture, nothing was ever done without debt, without balance. Yet he had stepped into fire, not for gain, but because it was right. She followed when he turned, her legs weak but moving. As they disappeared into the smoke, whispers began to spread among the survivors. Some had seen the human's courage from afar. Some had seen him strike like lightning, saving the leader's daughter. By the time dawn touched the ruined city, the story had already begun. One human had done what no one else dared. And the alien woman, walking silently beside him, knew her life had just changed forever. The night slowly gave way to a weak, gray morning. Smoke still lingered in the sky, covering the sun, and the city carried the heavy smell of ash and blood. People gathered in small groups, whispering about the attack, counting the dead, and searching for the missing. In every corner, sorrow hung like a heavy curtain. Yet, among these whispers, one story began to rise louder than the rest. It was the story of the human. The alien girl walked slowly behind him, her steps unsteady. Every few moments she glanced at his back, trying to understand what kind of man he was. He had saved her without hesitation, fought against raiders like a storm, and yet when it was over, he asked for nothing. Her people were not used to such acts. To them, every favor had a cost, every rescue demanded repayment. They whispered that no human could be selfless. So what did this man want? As they reached the safety of a half-broken temple, other survivors turned to look at them. Eyes widened and voices lowered. Mothers pulled their children closer, warriors stood taller, and elders frowned deeply. The sight was strange. The leader's daughter, protected not by her own guards, but by a human outsider. It was almost unthinkable. An elder stepped forward, his long robes stained with ash. His voice trembled with both relief and suspicion. "Is it true? Did this man save you?" His sharp eyes turned to the girl. She hesitated, her lips pressed together. But then she nodded once. A murmur ran through the crowd like a wave. Some gasped in disbelief, others shook their heads. The elder's gaze shifted to the human. "And why? What reason do you have to risk your life for her?" The human stood quietly, his face unreadable. Finally, he answered, his voice low and simple. "Because she needed help." That was all. Just those 4 words. The crowd exchanged glances. For her people, such an answer was impossible to accept. Help always carried weight. Help meant debt. They whispered among themselves, trying to twist his words into something they could understand. Perhaps he wanted honor. Perhaps he sought reward. Perhaps he planned to use her later for power. The idea that he acted with no hidden purpose unsettled them more than any other explanation. The alien girl lowered her eyes, her chest tightening. She wanted to speak, to defend him, but the weight of her people's stares silenced her. They were not ready to believe in his honesty, but she had seen his eyes in the firelight. She had heard his voice when he said she was safe. For some reason, she believed him. More survivors joined them as the day dragged on. Each one brought more stories of the attack, but always, the human's name rose in their voices. Some called him a hero. Others spat the word like an insult, unwilling to let an outsider hold such honor. Soldiers who had failed to protect their own leader's daughter clenched their fists in shame when they looked at him. Children stared with wide eyes, whispering, "That's him, the human who fought the raiders." The alien girl's father finally arrived, carried on a stretcher, wounded but alive. His eyes, sharp even in pain, locked on his daughter first. Relief softened his face. Then he turned his gaze to the human standing nearby, silent and steady. The father pushed himself to sit, ignoring the protests of his healers. "Is it true?" he asked, his voice rough. "You saved my child?" The human said nothing at first, but then gave a short nod. The father studied him, his expression unreadable, and then he whispered something that silenced the entire room. "Then my family owes you a debt that cannot be repaid." The words dropped like stones into water, ripples spreading across every listener. In their culture, saving a life was not a simple act. It was binding. It created a connection stronger than law, stronger than blood. Some nodded in agreement, others stiffened in fear. If this was true, if the human now carried such a bond with the leader's family, then everything had changed. The girl felt her cheeks burn. She wanted to protest, to shout that she had not asked for this, but her heart betrayed her. Deep down, a strange warmth flickered whenever she looked at the man who had risked his life for hers. She could not explain it, but she felt it. The whispers grew louder as night fell again. Around fires, families argued. Some said the human was a blessing sent by fate. Others warned he would bring ruin, that outsiders could never be trusted. Children begged to hear the story again and again, their eyes shining with wonder. Warriors clenched their weapons, bitter that it was not one of them who had earned such honor. And through it all, the human sat quietly, never boasting, never defending himself. He mended his rifle, cleaned his blade, and sat in silence. The alien girl found herself watching him when she thought no one else noticed. She wanted to ask him so many questions about Earth, about why he fought so hard, about what kind of man he truly was. But the words stuck in her throat. By the time the stars filled the sky, one truth had become clear. The human's act of bravery had shaken the foundations of their society. He was no longer just a stranger. He was a symbol of hope to some, of danger to others. And as the girl lay awake that night, staring at the broken ceiling of the temple, she knew this was only the beginning. One act of heroism had changed everything, and there was no going back. The great hall was lit by torches, their flames flickering against tall stone walls. The alien council sat in a wide circle, their faces serious, their eyes fixed on the human who stood at the center. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the crackle of fire and the whispers of those waiting outside the doors. The girl stood near her father, her hands clenched tightly, her heart pounding as she waited to hear what would be decided. The eldest council member rose first. His voice was deep, filled with weight and command. This human saved the leader's daughter. This cannot be ignored. In our laws, in our traditions, such an act binds the lives of both. The rescuer is forever tied to the one they saved. Murmurs filled the room, some agreeing, some shaking their heads. Another elder stood quickly, his tone sharp. But he is not one of us. He is human. He does not follow our laws. To bind him with our customs is dangerous. It will bring shame. His words carried anger, but also fear. The idea of mixing their traditions with a human felt like breaking sacred ground. The girl lifted her eyes to look at the human. He stood silently, not showing pride or fear, just calm. He did not bow, nor did he argue. He listened, as though this was not his fight. That calmness only made the council more unsettled. They wanted him to plead, to demand, to show weakness. But he did none of those things. Her father's voice cut through the noise. He saved my blood. Would any of you have done the same? Would any of you have run into fire for a stranger? No. Yet he did. You cannot deny his courage. His words struck the council hard. Some lowered their eyes in shame. Others crossed their arms, unwilling to be moved. The debate grew louder. Some shouted that he should be rewarded with gold, land, or weapons, but not bound to their traditions. Others said gold was nothing compared to life, and only the strongest bond could repay it. The girl's chest grew tight as she heard their words. She knew where this was leading. Her people's traditions were clear. When a life was saved, the savior gained a bond deeper than family, often sealed with union. Her stomach twisted. She wanted to scream that it was unfair, that she had not chosen this. She wanted to say that she was more than a tradition, more than a prize to be given away. But the weight of centuries-old customs pressed down on her shoulders, stealing her voice. Finally, the eldest elder raised his hand for silence. His face was grave, his voice slow and final. The council has spoken. The debt cannot be denied. This human must be rewarded with the highest honor our people know. He will be bound to the leader's daughter. Their lives will be joined. The words crashed over the hall like thunder. Gasps echoed. Some shouted in anger, others in shock. The girl's heart stopped, her eyes wide as if she had been struck. She looked at her father, hoping he would refuse, but he did not. His face was full of conflict, yet he bowed his head in acceptance. Tradition was stronger than even a father's will. Her hands shook. She turned to the human, anger rising in her chest. "This is not your place," she whispered sharply, though only he could hear. "I didn't ask to be saved." Her eyes burned with tears she refused to let fall. The human looked at her, his expression calm, almost sad. He did not reach for her, did not try to claim her. He simply said softly, "I never wanted to trap you." His words hit her harder than she expected. They carried no pride, no demand, only truth. The council's decision spread quickly beyond the hall. By nightfall, the city was alive with gossip. Some cheered the human as a hero destined to bring strength to their people. Others cursed him as a curse sent to break their traditions. Families argued in their homes, children whispered with wide eyes, and soldiers glared with silent hatred. The girl lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, her heart heavy. She felt anger at the council, at her people, at the human, and even at herself. Yet beneath the anger was something she could not name, something that twisted her chest whenever she remembered the way he had stood between her and death, the way he had spoken with honesty when no one else did. The human, meanwhile, sat alone outside the hall, watching the stars through the smoke-filled sky. He had not asked for this. He had never expected that one act of courage would change his life forever. He closed his eyes, knowing tomorrow would bring more challenges, more suspicion, and perhaps more battles. But deep inside, something told him this was only the beginning. One act of heroism had already bound their fates together, and neither of them could escape what was to come. The morning sun rose weakly over the ruined city, its light falling on broken walls and streets still stained from battle. Inside a chamber lit by dim torches, the alien girl stood with her head lowered. Her hands twisted nervously at her sides, her mind racing. She had been called to stand before the human, the one who had saved her, the one her people now said was tied to her by law and tradition. She felt anger boiling inside her, but also fear, and beneath it all, a strange confusion she could not name. When the guards finally opened the heavy doors, she stepped inside. The human was waiting. He stood near a window where the sunlight touched his face. His armor was still scratched from the fight, his hands bandaged where blades had cut him. Yet he stood tall, calm, as though he carried no weight on his shoulders. She wanted to hate him for his calmness. She wanted him to be angry like her, to shout that this union was madness, but instead he only turned slowly and met her eyes. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "I didn't ask for this," she said, her words sharp like broken glass. "I didn't ask to be saved. I didn't ask to be tied to you." The anger she had held back in the council now poured out, her chest heaving as she fought to keep her tears from falling. The human did not move closer. He listened, his jaw tight, his eyes steady. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. "I know. I never wanted this either. I didn't save you for reward. I saved you because it was right." His words only twisted her more inside. She wanted to scream at him, to accuse him of lying, but deep down she remembered his face in the firelight. The way he had stood against death when no one else came. He had not asked her name, had not demanded anything in return. He had only fought, and he had won. "You don't understand," she whispered bitterly. "My people see this as binding. They think I belong to you now. Do you know what that means?" Her voice broke, heavy with fear and shame. The human shook his head. "You don't belong to me. No one belongs to anyone. If I am tied to you, it's not because of what your people say. It's because fate put me in that alley when you needed help." His calmness, his refusal to take advantage of what the council had forced, made her heart beat faster. It confused her. She turned away, pacing the chamber, her fingers digging into her palms. She hated her people's laws, hated how they treated her like an object to be given away, hated that this man had walked into her life and changed everything. But when she remembered the raider's blades at her throat, she also hated the thought of what would have happened if he hadn't been there. Silence stretched between them, heavy and tense. Finally, he stepped forward, not too close, but enough that she could see the tired lines on his face, the honesty in his eyes. "I won't force this," he said softly. "I don't care what they decide. If you don't want this bond, then it's not real. You have the choice." The words caught her off guard. She spun toward him, her lips parted in shock. No one had ever spoken to her like that. In her people's culture, choice was a weak word. Tradition was stronger, law was stronger, duty was stronger. Yet here was a human, a man who knew nothing of her ways, telling her that she had the power to choose. Her throat tightened. She wanted to shout at him again, to tell him to leave, but her voice softened instead. "Why?" she asked. "Why give me a choice when you could claim everything?" His answer was simple. "Because it's your life, not mine." The weight of those words pressed into her chest. She had never been given freedom, not even by her own father. Her entire life had been guided by rules and expectations. Now this outsider, who had no reason to care, was giving her more respect than anyone she had ever known. She didn't know whether to hate him more or to feel something else she could not name. The day passed slowly. Word of the council's decision spread further, and by evening, people began to gather outside the chamber, waiting to see them together. Some cheered, calling the human a hero who had earned the highest honor. Others muttered curses, saying their traditions were being stained. Every sound reached her ears, making her heart heavy with dread. When the doors opened and they were asked to stand side by side, the girl's breath caught in her throat. She looked at the human, who gave her only a small, steady nod. He did not reach for her, did not act like he owned her. He simply stood there, strong but silent, letting her decide how close to stand. She finally stepped beside him, her arms tight against her body, her eyes lowered. The whispers from the crowd grew louder. Some smiled with approval, others spat on the ground in anger. She felt their eyes burning into her skin, but strangely, she also felt a flicker of safety standing next to him, as though he would shield her again if the world turned against her. That night, when the chamber was quiet and the torches burned low, she lay awake staring at the shadows. Anger still churned inside her, but it mixed now with something else, uncertainty and a strange curiosity about the man who had turned her world upside down. He had been forced into her life, yet in his presence she did not feel caged. She felt watched over. The human sat nearby, leaning against the wall, awake as well. His eyes stayed on the door, guarding, as though danger could return at any moment. He didn't notice her gaze, or perhaps he did and chose not to show it. She wondered if fate truly had bound them, or if it was only the madness of her people's laws. But one truth whispered inside her heart, quiet and unshakable. Her life would never again be the same. The days after the council's decision were filled with tension. The human stayed close to the alien girl, not because he demanded it, but because her people insisted he was now bound to her. Everywhere they walked, eyes followed them, some with admiration, others with hate. Whispers floated through the streets, words sharp as blades. Some called him a savior, a hero sent by fate. Others called him a curse, a weak outsider who would bring shame to their blood. The girl heard it all, and every whisper cut deeper than any wound. She tried to keep her distance from him, walking with her head held high, but fate would not allow her peace. One afternoon, as the sun burned through the haze of smoke, a group of young alien warriors stepped into their path. Their leader sneered, his voice dripping with venom. "So this is the human who thinks he can take what belongs to us. You think saving one life makes you worthy of her?" The girl froze, her stomach tightening. She wanted to speak, to defend herself, but her voice would not rise. She turned to the human, afraid of what he might say. He stood tall, his eyes calm, his jaw tight. He didn't answer the insult. He only watched the warriors carefully, his hands resting near his belt, ready if needed. The alien leader laughed cruelly at his silence. "Look at him. Too weak to speak, too weak to fight without his strange weapons. Watch, we'll show everyone what a mistake the council has made." His men surrounded them, their hands on their blades, their eyes flashing with hatred. The girl's heart pounded in her chest. She stepped forward quickly, spreading her arms to block them. "Enough!" she cried. "This isn't honor. This is shame. He saved me when none of you could." Her voice shook, but her words rang through the street. The warriors hesitated, anger burning in their eyes, but her presence as the leader's daughter forced them to hold back. The human finally spoke, his voice quiet but strong. "If you want to test me, do it away from her." His words made the warriors laugh again, mocking him. Yet the challenge was accepted. The leader stepped forward, pulling his curved blade from its sheath. The crowd began to gather, whispers turning into eager voices. They wanted to see the human fall. They wanted proof that he was nothing. The fight began quickly. The alien leader lunged, his blade flashing in the sunlight. The human moved aside just in time, the blade cutting only air. He countered with his fist, striking the warrior's jaw. The crowd gasped. The alien staggered, but did not fall. He came again, faster, angrier. Steel clashed with steel as the human pulled his knife, blocking the attacks with skill learned from battles far harsher than this. The girl watched, frozen, her hands pressed to her chest. Every strike felt like it hit her heart. She could see the difference between them. Her people's warrior fought with pride and rage, but the human fought with focus, with purpose. He never wasted a move, never fought to show strength. He fought to survive. The battle grew fierce, dust rising around them as the sound of metal echoed through the street. Finally, the human caught the warrior's wrist, twisting it sharply until the blade clattered to the ground. In one smooth motion, he pushed the warrior down, his knife pressed against the alien's throat. Silence fell over the crowd, all eyes locked on him, waiting to see what he would do. The alien leader's chest heaved with rage and shame. He spat, expecting death, but the human slowly lowered his knife and stepped back. "I don't need to kill you," he said firmly. "This fight was never about her. It was about your pride. Keep it if you want, but don't threaten her again." The crowd erupted with whispers, shocked by what they had seen. The alien warrior scrambled to his feet, his face burning with humiliation. He glared at the girl, then at the human, before storming away with his men. The girl's knees felt weak. She rushed to the human's side, her voice low and shaken. "Why didn't you finish him? He would have killed you if he had the chance." The human looked at her, his eyes calm once again. "Because I'm not here to prove I'm stronger. I only fight to protect." Her breath caught at those words. They echoed in her mind, wrapping around her heart. She had seen many warriors fight, had seen many battles where strength meant everything. But this man, this human, fought differently. He didn't fight for glory. He fought for life, for others, for her. That night, the city buzzed with the story. Some said the human was foolish to let his enemy live. Others said his restraint showed greater strength than any sword. Children whispered about the fight, their eyes shining with awe. The elders remained divided, but one truth could not be denied. The human had once again proven himself. The girl sat by the fire later, staring at the flames. Her mind replayed every moment of the fight, every strike, every word. She remembered the way he had refused to claim her, the way he had lowered his blade when he had already won. Slowly, a thought grew in her heart, one she did not dare speak aloud. Perhaps her people were wrong. Perhaps the council was wrong. Perhaps she was the one who was changing. When she finally looked up, she saw the human sitting quietly across from her, his eyes distant, watching the night sky. He didn't know how deeply his actions had touched her. He didn't know that something inside her had shifted forever. But she knew. And that frightened her more than anything else. The days after the fight were filled with restless tension. The alien people could not agree on what the human meant for them. Some whispered that he was chosen by fate, a gift to their people. Others muttered that he was a curse, a shadow that would destroy their honor. Wherever he walked, eyes followed him. Some filled with respect, some with fear, many with suspicion. The girl felt his weight heavier than anyone else. It was her life, her honor, her future that had been bound to him, and every whisper felt like a knife against her skin. She sat alone in her chamber one evening, staring at her reflection in a cracked mirror. Her eyes were tired, her shoulders heavy. She thought about the raiders, about the way he had stood against them when no one else came. She thought about the fight with her own people's warrior, the way he had defeated him but refused to kill. Those moments clashed inside her heart, pulling her in different directions. She wanted to resist, to keep her anger, but something deeper was breaking through. Admiration, and a dangerous kind of trust. When she stepped outside, she found him again, working with the villagers to rebuild the broken walls. His hands were covered in dust, his shirt torn, but he lifted heavy stones without complaint. Children ran around him, laughing, asking questions, and though he was quiet, he answered them patiently. She stood watching from a distance, her chest tightening. This was not the image of a conqueror, not the man her people warned her about. He was helping, quietly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Later that night, the elders called another meeting. The fire burned bright in the center as voices rose one after another. Some demanded that the human be cast out before he gained too much influence. Others argued that his strength and courage had already proven his worth. But when the girl stood and spoke, the fire seemed to flicker with her words. "You speak of honor," she said, her voice firm though her heart shook. "But none of you ran into fire to save me. None of you stood against the raiders when I was cornered. He did. And when challenged, he fought not for glory, but to protect. If honor means courage, then he has shown more than any of us." Gasps filled the hall. Some of the counselors glared at her. Others looked away in shame. Her father, though silent, studied her carefully. The human stood behind her, his expression unreadable, but his eyes shone with something quiet, gratitude, and perhaps respect. The debate continued, but the whispers outside the hall had already begun to shift. People who once doubted now spoke softly of his actions, of the walls he rebuilt, of the children he protected from falling debris, of the way he stood guard at night without ever being asked. The more they watched, the harder it became to call him weak. For the girl, the change was even stronger. She had begun to feel safer when he was near, though she would not admit it aloud. She noticed small things. The way he always walked slightly behind her in crowded streets so she would not be pushed. The way he gave food to the hungry before eating himself. The way he spoke less but listened more. These small acts, simple and human, touched her more deeply than any heroic battle. One night, as they sat near the fire, she finally asked the question that had been burning in her chest. Why do you do this? Why help people who do not trust you? Why fight for those who would see you gone? He looked at her for a long moment, his face shadowed by the firelight. Then he said, "Because I know what it feels like to be abandoned. I won't let anyone else feel that if I can stop it." Her breath caught. She did not know his past, but his words carried pain she could feel. For the first time, she looked at him not as an outsider, not as someone forced into her life, but as a man carrying scars she could not see. Something stirred inside her heart, soft, dangerous, and undeniable. Still, not everyone accepted him. A group of soldiers whispered of driving him out by force. They spoke of honor, of purity, of keeping their traditions safe. But the girl now stood openly beside him. When she heard the threats, she faced the soldiers herself. "If you want to drive him out," she said coldly, "you'll have to go through me first." The words shocked even her, but they came from a place of truth. She was no longer just bound by tradition. She was choosing him, even if her heart had not yet fully understood why. That night, she sat awake, listening to the silence of the city. The human was outside, keeping watch as always. She thought about the bond forced upon them, about the council's decision. At first, it had felt like a cage, a prison made of tradition. But now, when she thought of him, it no longer felt like chains. It felt like something else, something freer, something hers. As dawn touched the horizon, she rose quietly and stepped outside. He was still awake, leaning against the wall, his eyes scanning the shadows. When he noticed her, he gave a small nod, nothing more. Yet in that moment, she realized something powerful. Her people may have forced her into his arms, but her heart was beginning to walk there on its own. And that truth frightened her more than any blade ever could. The night was heavy with silence, broken only by the distant crack of weapons and the smell of smoke drifting on the wind. The raiders had returned, stronger than before, and this time they came not only for treasure, but for blood. The city walls trembled under their assault, and fear spread quickly among the people. Soldiers rushed to their posts, children were hidden away, and elders prayed for survival. In the middle of this chaos stood the human, his eyes scanning the battlefield with sharp focus. Beside him was the alien girl, her face pale but determined. She clutched a short blade, though her hands shook. He looked at her once, his voice calm but urgent. "Stay behind me. If they break through, you run. Don't look back." She shook her head fiercely. "No, I won't leave you." The words surprised even her, but they burned with truth. She had once resisted him, once hated the bond forced upon them, but now she could not imagine turning her back. He gave a small nod, as if he already knew her answer. The first wave of raiders crashed through the broken gates. Their roars shook the air as they surged forward. The human stepped ahead, his rifle raised, his movements precise. Each shot found its mark, dropping enemies before they reached the line. When his bullets ran low, he fought with blade and fists, his body moving like it had been trained for this moment his whole life. He took blows, his arm bled, but he never stopped. The alien soldiers watched in disbelief. This human, whom many had called weak, stood like a wall against the storm. His courage ignited something inside them. They rallied, shouting battle cries, fighting harder than before. The girl's heart pounded as she watched him, her fear mixing with fierce pride. Every strike he made was not only for survival, but for them, for her, for the people who had doubted him. The battle raged into the night. At one point, a raider broke through and lunged for the girl. She froze, the blade in her hand trembling uselessly. But before it could strike, the human was there. He threw himself between them, driving his knife deep into the enemy's chest. The girl gasped, her eyes wide. He had once again shielded her without hesitation, even when it meant risking his life. Blood dripped down his arm, his breathing heavy, but he only glanced at her for a moment. "You're safe," he said again, the same words he had spoken on the night they first met. Something inside her broke then. Tears burned her eyes, but she fought them back. She realized she no longer stood beside him because of tradition or law. She stood because she wanted to. Hours passed. The fighting did not end, but slowly the tide began to turn. With the human's leadership, with his refusal to yield, the people found strength they did not know they had. By dawn, the last of the raiders fled into the forests, leaving the city scarred but standing. The cries of battle faded, replaced by the stunned silence of survival. The people gathered in the square, exhausted, wounded, but alive. All eyes turned to the human, who leaned on his rifle, bloodied but unbroken. For the first time, no one whispered against him. No one called him weak. Instead, voices rose together, chanting his name, calling him savior, warrior, brother. The elders stepped forward, their faces humbled. The eldest spoke slowly, his voice carrying across the crowd. "We doubted you. We feared you. But you saved not only the leader's daughter, you saved us all. From this day forward, you are one of us." The human only nodded, saying nothing, but the girl saw the weight in his eyes. He had not fought for glory. He had not fought to be accepted. He had fought because he could not stand aside when lives were in danger. That was who he was. And that was why her people now bowed their heads to him. Her father, still weak from his wounds, placed a hand on her shoulder and looked at the human with respect. "You have proven yourself in ways no law can measure. My daughter is bound to you by tradition, but now I see she is bound by choice as well." His words made the girl's cheeks flush, but she did not turn away. When the crowd finally dispersed, leaving only smoke and the first light of morning, the girl stood beside him quietly. She looked up at him, her voice soft. "You changed everything. One act, one choice, and nothing is the same." He met her eyes, tired but warm. "Maybe it was never about changing everything," he said. "Maybe it was just about doing what was right." Her heart ached at his simplicity. She had been raised in a world of rules, debts, and traditions, where every action carried a price. But he had taught her something different, something deeper, that courage and kindness could exist without reason. And for the first time, she felt her bond to him not as chains, but as freedom. As the sun rose higher, lighting the broken city in gold, she slipped her hand into his. It was a small act, but powerful. No one had forced her this time. No tradition demanded it. It was her choice. He looked down at her, surprise flickering in his eyes, but he did not pull away. Instead, he tightened his hand gently around hers. And in that moment, she knew her life had truly begun again. What had started with fear and anger had ended with trust and something more, something that felt like hope. One act of heroism had not only saved her life, it had given her a future.